So day 7 and the final day of The Boy Who Made the World Disappear. Harrison, Harrison, someone far away was calling him. Harrison, wake up. He opened his eyes and immediately felt sick. How much of that was to do with altitude and how much to do with Shelley shaking him vigorously by the shoulders? He wasn't exactly sure. What happened? He asked her. You fainted, said Shelley. I was going to give you some oxygen, but then I figured you might need it because this needs feeding. She held up what appeared to be an empty piece of string hovering in midair. It's gone, exclaimed Harrison. Almost, said Shelley. It's about the size of a strawberry seed. I'd say you've got about another. She made some quick calculations in her head. 5 minutes and 38 seconds before it disappears completely. What? Exclaimed Harrison. We need to move fast, said Shelley. So I'm going to keep this short. Number 1, you need to put the entire Earth in your black hole. That's the only thing that can stop it shrinking to nothing now. Number 2, you need to make it spin. Number 3, you need to throw yourself in. Am I making sense? Not really, said Harrison. Okay, said Shelley. There's no way out of a black hole unless it's spinning. She pressed a button on her remote and the giant mirror began to rotate. Because as you know, that turns the black hole into an Einstein-Rosen bridge. As she spoke, she climbed the rickety wooden contraption into a seat that was set on top of a giant lever arm. But I need your help, called Harrison over the noise of the machine. I still don't know how to get everything back. You'll be fine, said Shelley, bracing herself. It's pretty much foolproof. Just remember, Earth, spin, throw yourself in. She pressed a button on the remote. Oh, wait, she said, there's one more thing I need to tell you. Make sure the black hole is spinning the right way. The last time I did this, I went into the past instead of the future. Lift off in T minus 10, 9, 8, boomed a voice. Shelley sat back in her seat, ready for another extraordinary journey. 7, 6. One more thing, she said, breaking her concentration for a moment. 5, 4. You've got to get the speed right. I wasn't quite fast enough and ended up 28 instead of 8. You don't want to change age, so creep in as slowly as possible. 3, 2. She gave Harrison a big smile and sat back again. Then, a split second later, she sat back up. 1. You need to keep calm, she shouted. Any emotional disturbance and you'll end up off your timeline. Ignition! Which means there'll be 2 of you, the new you and the old you. And trust me, you really don't want that. The mirror was now spinning really fast and the noise was almost deafening. Blast off! Apart from that, it's quite literally child's play. The giant arm launched her head first across the room, right into the spinning black hole. All that was left were the soles of Shelley's shoes slowly fading from view. But Harrison didn't wait to watch them fade into darkness. He had work to do and very little time to do it. He snatched up the string and ran outside. He fitted his mask to his face and twisted the top of the oxygen bottle. Sweet and sour, sweet and sour. Then he dipped the end of the string into the dust on the ground. Nothing. Was he too late? He peered at the end of the string. If his black hole was there, he couldn't see it. He tried again, dipping the bottom of the string back in the sand. And then something started to happen. Something incredible. All the sand on the plateau began to tremble as if it was being sucked up by the world's most powerful and most tiny Hoover. There was a jolt and he was hit by a gale of wind, flinging him upwards. It was as much as he could do to hold on. Now he could see his black hole again, right at the end of the string, the size of a golf ball. It was working. The hole was growing again. Beneath him, the entire mountain appeared to shudder and fold, as if it was as thin as a bedsheet. Then it sucked up into the black hole. Harrison felt as if his head was about to explode, and the wind blasted against him even more strongly. He took a deep breath through the mask. Sweet and sour, sweet and sour. The black hole was the size of a football now and still growing. Way below him, the earth began to curve and the sun began to rise as torrents of rock rushed up towards him. For a few brief seconds, he was burning in the brightest, hottest sunlight he had ever seen. And then he was plunged into darkness. Sweet and sour, sweet and sour. And suddenly he was floating in space with nothing but a huge black hole between him and the sun. The entire earth had disappeared inside his black hole. The whole world and everything in it, every person, animal, and plant was relying on him to get this right. He looked at the oxygen bottle. He could only have a few minutes of oxygen left. He needed to think fast. Sweet and sour, sweet and sour. Shelley's words echoed in his brain. Earth spin, throw yourself in. He put the earth in. He'd put the earth in. Now he needed to make the black hole spin again. But which way and how? He looked up at the black hole, deep and dark, with the sun burning round it like a halo. But wait, where were the stars? Ah, there they were, like a carpet beneath his feet. Now, what was it Shelley had been trying to tell him before she shot off? Spin one way, you go into the past. Spin the other way, you go into the future. But which was which? There was no way to know. He looked down at his trainers. There was a bright star halfway between them that he thought he recognised. Now that he looked more closely, he could see that the crisscross pattern beneath his feet was Cygnus the swan, and the bright star was Deneb, its tail. But there was a problem. Cygnus wasn't spinning, and that meant he wasn't spinning either. He tried twisting his body. It was useless. There was nothing to push against except empty space. Then he had an idea. He took off one of his shoes, threw it, and Cygnus looked like it was beginning to turn, which meant he and his black hole were spinning. So he took off his other shoe and threw that too. Now Cygnus was turning even faster. Then Harrison started to climb the string, hand over hand, closer and closer to the black hole. He stretched out his hand. His heart began to beat faster. What if something went wrong? What if he fell inside and never got out? Keep calm, Shelley said. He had to keep calm. Sweet and sour, sweet and sour. He touched its edge. Then, whoosh, he took off as if he was sliding headfirst down the world's greatest, biggest water slide. Harrison was thrown left and right and up and down as he rushed through space and time, faster and faster. He saw blue barking, then a giant piece of broccoli. Hector Broom flicking his elastic band, swimming pools and textbooks rushing past him so fast he had to close his eyes. And finally, way off in the distance, he glimpsed his parents waving to him. But wait, were they waving hello or goodbye? Suddenly, he was rushing away from them, out past stars and galaxies and galactic clusters, out into darkness. And then everything stopped. Harrison opened his eyes. There was Cygnus again, only it wasn't spinning anymore. It had worked. Then Harrison realised he wasn't wearing his oxygen mask. He was lying on his back, looking up at the stars on the ceiling at Hector Broom's space party. Right, said Shelley, shall we play some games? She flicked a row of switches on the wall and all the lights came back on. He'd done it. He'd travelled back in time to Hector's birthday party. That meant none of the bad things had happened yet. His parents, Blue, Hector Broom, and the entire planet was safe and sound. For a few seconds, Harrison lay there, flooded with relief. Then he smiled an absolutely enormous smile. He jumped to his feet and raised his hands as high as it would go. Yes, he bellowed, and everyone laughed. Needless to say, it turned out to be one of the best birthday parties ever. And when Hector Broom pulled out his rubber band and gave a menacing smirk, Harrison found he didn't care. Once you've seen the inside of a black hole and lost almost everyone you love, an elastic band doesn't seem quite so scary. Harrison was enjoying himself so much that he hardly noticed his mother and father creeping in at the end. You're here, yelled Harrison, and raced across the room to give them both a huge hug. He'd missed his parents so much. Then he spotted Lana and gave her a big hug too. Harrison had been a real pleasure to look after, Shelley told his parents. One by one, Shelley gave each child a slice of birthday cake and a beautiful shiny helium balloon in the shape of a planet. Hector Broom got a stripy brown and yellow Jupiter. Persephone Drinkwater got a purple Venus. Charlie Nwosu got a sky blue Neptune. Marcus Down got an orange Saturn with pink rings. And Carl Ng got a bluey green Uranus. Katie Broad got a silvery Mercury, which was very lucky because it matched her angel costume. Finally, it was Harrison's turn. Have you got a balloon for Harrison? Asked Harrison's mother. Ah, said Shelley. Yes, I've got a special balloon for you, Harrison. Harrison's heart sank. Could it be happening all over again? He didn't want a black hole. But then Shelley handed him a beautiful red balloon. This is Mars, she said, tying it to his wrist. Who's Mars named after? Do you know? Harrison shook his head. He's the Roman god of war, said Shelley, but to win, he has to learn to control his temper. Maybe someone should give him a black hole, said Harrison with a knowing smile. Epilogue. So we had the prologue at the beginning and an epilogue is a little bit at the end, okay? It started by saying that most stories are about a good person who does a bad thing, and that this story was no exception. So let me finish by saying that most stories about a good person who does a bad thing have a moral, and this story is no exception to that rule either. So what, you may ask, is the moral of this story? Well, there are a few, oddly. One, which I think Harrison would agree with, is don't kick off at birthday parties. Another might be this. However difficult it is living in a world where people get angry, a world where people didn't get angry would be worse. If people didn't get angry about injustices or unfairness, then things would never change. Or maybe this. Sometimes angry people are just frightened people in disguise. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, if you bottle up your worries, they might come out as anger. But if you try to explain your worries, you might just find someone who understands and who is able to help. I like those. I'm going to say those again, actually. The first one, which I think Harrison would agree with, is don't kick off at birthday parties. Another might be, however difficult it is living in a world where people get angry, a world where people didn't get angry would be worse. If people didn't get angry about injustices or unfairness, then things would never change. Or maybe this, sometimes angry people are just frightened people in disguise. And lastly, if you bottle up your worries, they might come out as anger. But if you try to explain your worries, you might just find someone who understands and who is able to help. I like them. The sciencey bit, okay? Since I wrote this story, I've received lots of letters from children asking me if black holes are real and whether there is any danger that they might accidentally fall into one. First, the bad news. Black holes are real. There's one in the constellation of Cygnus, just like in the story. And some people even say there's a tiny one, about the size of a balloon, in the outer reaches of our solar system. But now the good news. The chances of falling into one are zero, unless, that is, you are planning a holiday near Deneb or a mini break near Neptune. So what else in the story is true? Well, Harrison is a real person, though he's never been on a mini break beyond Neptune. So he's never fallen into a black hole or been able to put anything else into one either. Although sometimes I'm sure he wishes he could. And until he learnt to use such words, he really did have a temper. Black holes do shrink, although not nearly as fast as they do in this story. The very clever scientist Stephen Hawking taught us that. And according to two other very clever scientists, Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen, a spinning black hole might, I repeat, might form an Einstein-Rosen bridge. But no one has ever seen a real grandmother travel back in time through one. The other thing in Harrison's story that is definitely real is the very large telescope in the Atacama Desert. The VLT is the world's most advanced visible light astronomical observatory, which basically means that it's the best place in the entire world to go if you want to see something in space. And it is actually a collection of 4 telescopes. Together they are so powerful that if you took a car to the moon and turned on its headlights, the VLT would be able to see them from Earth. The observatory is open to visitors, so you can go and see it for yourself. You just need to log on to the website, smuggle yourself onto a flight to Chile, of course, or become an astronomer. Then you can see black holes for yourself, or even make one. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you want to take an accelerated reader quiz, there's the number, 238449. And I shall start reading a new book tomorrow. Ta-ta!